Jumbo. This is the Lumumba Africa Report. I am Lumumba Africa. I have a blog called the Lumumba Africa Report. You can read my blog entries at lumumbaafrica.wordpress.com. Today I want to talk a little about this new Green Deal. Maybe some people have heard this in the news recently. The reason I want to talk about this is because I think that in African nationalists, black nationalists, pro-black, Pan-African, African-centered, whatever term you like to use, circles, there isn't enough discussion about what's called globalism. There is a lot of attention to something called white supremacy, something I call white hegemony, but that's neither here nor there. But there is very little focus on the people and organizations that are propagating, that are administering, that are creating the policies and programmatic frameworks through which quote-unquote white supremacy or white hegemony is put forth and implemented. One person did some analysis on this. His name was Steve Coakley, who was able to name names, and that was through his work in exposing the Boule. There is a new book called Who is the Boule that I encourage people to pick up. It was written by Ishangi. He has a website called ghettotimes.com where you can get a copy of his book, Who is the Boule. But now, to discuss this Green New Deal, which is a total fraud and a plagiarization, we'll get into this media darling that you see on the screen here. Her name's Cortez, Alexandria Cortez, and a year ago no one heard of this person, but now she is the newest sensation. This woman is a fraud in herself, and we'll get to that soon. But let's talk about this new Green Deal, which allegedly was created over a weekend by her staff in order to realize various goals. Here on the website technocracy.news, we see a report about the origins of this so-called Green New Deal that this ex-bartender, who up until a few months ago was serving icy cold drafts of beer and Jello shots, all of a sudden now has the magic bullet to salvage the economy and society at large. In 2009, a UN document titled Rethinking the Economic Recovery, a Global Green New Deal, it was discovered that this Cortez woman here is not putting forth a new movement of the people, as she claims, but it was the creation of a small group of global elite working through the United Nations. A professor at the University of Wyoming named Edward B. Barbier wrote a report. The report was prepared for the United Nations Environment Program. Now, what is the United Nations Environment Program? Now, this is very interesting. This is where we're going to get into the real connections. Why you see this is just the cover photo. This is just the media face of a very sinister plan by people who are referred to in our circles as white supremacists, but are generally referred to as either globalist or elitist, global elite, etc. The United Nations Environmental Program was sponsored in 1992 at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. Now, this is very interesting because the Earth Summit was chaired, if I'm not mistaken, by a man named Maurice Strong. Maurice Strong was a high school graduate, if that. That is the extent of his formal education. He became a millionaire in Canadian mining and was under the tutelage of the Rockefellers for his whole entire life, and had dealings in South Africa, South African mining, and in mining interest in Midwestern United States. I mean, this guy is a well-connected person, and he was the chair or a very high official in this 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. At this Earth Summit is where they came up with the doctrine of sustainable development and produced the Agenda 21 book. Now, we've heard of sustainable development a lot over the past couple of decades. This is where it originated. And maybe some people are familiar with Agenda 21, which was recently exposed as early as maybe 7 or 8 years ago as a framework through which to control municipalities and state governments through the implementation of the so-called sustainable development goals. It is also implemented on the African continent in order to realize what they call Millennium Development Goals. See, they use different language, but the same program, and we'll see that very soon. So, this United Nations Environment Program, which sponsored the Earth Summit to create these doctrines, has been at the root of every intellectually bankrupt scheme to flip the world into a resource-based economy. Basically, a resource-based economy means a small elite control the resources and they dole it out to the people who agree with their policies and programs. If you don't agree with the policy and programs of this small elite who are controlling the global resources, then you can die and wither or be put in jail and so on. So, this author of the 144-page report, Barbier, remember he is the professor at the University of Wyoming, wrote the report for the United Nations Environment Program, which sponsored the Earth Summit. Now, his report was called the Global Green New Deal, so the obvious plan was to implement this idea globally. In the report, Barbier credits many people as important contributors to his paper, but two particular contributors were the Center for American Progress and the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Now, what are these organizations? Let's look, and we'll see the connections between the United Nations, the Earth Summit, and who are euphemistically called the global elite or globalist or arch-white supremacist. Center for American Progress was founded by John Podesta. Now, we've heard his name in the news recently with this Clinton email scandal. So he is at the heart of this Green New Deal, that's being advertised by this young little coos that's got all these people hot and bothered. A prominent member and operative in the Trilateral Commission. Now that's Rockefeller's gang. So here we have Rockefeller's gang putting forth a Clinton operative in a paper written by a University of Wyoming professor called Global New Deal, that's put forward by this little harpy, this one of these young girls who thinks because they have a college degree they know it all, and because they're not obesely and disgustingly fat, and a few people want to sleep with her, that everything that comes out of her mouth is correct. It's a psychological game they're doing. Podesta was the principal architect for U.S. environmental policy for 2 decades. Okay? A connected man, a made man, working in the highest echelons of power. He was Bill Clinton's chief of staff, special counselor to Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton's campaign manager. This is the man who founded the Center for American Progress, which was a major contributor to a paper written by Barbier, who wrote about a global Green New Deal as recently as 2009 that is now being put forth by this little tramp. He, Podesta, in July 2002, was appointed by the UN Secretary General to the high-level panel on post-2015 development agenda. Now, why is that important? Who was the Secretary General of the United Nations in 2002? None other than your friend and mine, Kofi Annan. White woman-loving Kofi himself. Okay, so these are all keyed in members of the same clique. They're Negro frontmen, they're young little loudmouth coups front women, and all of the low-level players they have that they pull up like Maurice Strong and this guy Edward Barbier. They're administrators like Podesta, political officials like Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton. This is what the Green New Deal is about. It's no different. It's Hillary Clinton's administration through the back door. It's no different than what you would have got with her as president. Let's look at more board members of the board of directors for the Center of American Progress. Tom Daschle, senator. And looky what we have here. Stacey Abrams. Yeah, that's right. See, that's how they get you. They get some overweight, loudmouth, can't find a man who spent 20 years getting her law degree or a PhD, African woman, to be the front person, to be the Aunt Jemima face for their globalist dreams, an extension of white hegemony. They had mammy-ass Oprah go down to try to campaign for this Abrams person. You thought she was going to be revolutionary because the sisters are doing it right. Don't trust any African person who is not vetted, especially if they're a woman, trying to get into some high-level governmental position because they're most likely compromised. And this woman is compromised. This woman can't do anything for us. She's bought and paid for. She's their paid-for coon, just like Vernon Jordan was for Bill Clinton. Here we got some guy named Donald Sussman. I implore people to look up these names, do your own research on who they are, and some California billionaire named Tom Steyer. All right? So you see the players start to come into view when you see their connections. Let's look at the Peterson Institute for International Economics, founded by Peter G. Peterson, who's thankfully dead now. Also a member of the Trilateral Commission. So we got two members of the Trilateral Commission, John Podesta and Peter Peterson. Remember, the Trilateral Commission was created by Nelson Rockefeller. These are contributors, two interesting and major contributors to this report written by Barbier called the Global Green New Deal that's now being foisted upon us by this little hoe. Who are members of the boards of directors of the Peterson Institute for International Economics? Well, we got some guy named Larry Summers, and if anyone followed the Obama administration, you know he was like the Treasury Secretary in that administration. We got other names. Stanley Fisher, I think he was a assistant, a Fed chair person for a while, an Ashkenazi. We've got Alan Greenspan. He was the chair, a Fed chair for a while, another Ashkenazi here. We've got George Shultz. He was a former Secretary of State. Okay, member of the global clique. Paul Volcker, another Treasury Secretary. So these people are, and they're all keyed in with this Rockefeller gang. So these are all these former industrialists that transitioned into finance. They're trying to remake the global economic system. They're trying to destroy all independent economic systems to bring everyone into a global economic system controlled by them, in which they control the money and the resources and the ideology. And the ideology is climate change, global climate change. So they're going to get a dirty little bar tramp like this to sell it because you think you're going to get laid by her. You think, well, maybe I can get a little brown skin coos to work me over one night after drinking myself into oblivion at the bar. And so you want to sign on to for anything that comes out of her mouth. And one of them is the Global Green New Deal. And it is nothing that will benefit you or African people in general as we continue on our work for sovereignty. Let's look at the language that's similar. Here in Barbier's United Nations report, they say the multiple crises threatening the world economy today demand the same kind of initiative as shown by Roosevelt's New Deal in the 1930s. So they use the same language. And it's interesting about Roosevelt because there's a book I would recommend called The Roosevelt Myth, which goes into the pre-administration days of Roosevelt and analyzes the administration itself. And Roosevelt's administration was teeming with communists, avowed communist. Roosevelt's administration was the first to recognize the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was not recognized as a legitimate nation state until Roosevelt came in, because they had recognized up until then that a coup had been pulled off in 1917 with the so-called Russian Revolution, and the royal family were murdered by a set of international communists. But because Roosevelt was sympathetic to international communism and had communists all throughout his administration. In fact, in 1944, you can go to the Real News Network for this documentation, and the recent Hidden History of the United States documentary by Oliver Stone. Roosevelt was trying to get a communist as his running mate in 1944. He wasn't, thankfully, put in that position, but that was their attempt to totally remake the United States to a communist nation. And what is communism? It is creating a group of institutional network to administer different aspects of society, the economy, and the political power. That's what the New Deal was. And that, in fact, as the book states, the Roosevelt myth, in order to get into these New Deal programs, you had to register as a Democrat and you had to vote as a Democrat. And if you did not, you would not be able to participate in whatever programs or resources that were handed out. That's why lots of people became Democrats. It wasn't because they had some great egalitarian program. There was a depression going on. You couldn't get a job. You couldn't get food. So in order to get a job, get food, you had to register as a Democrat to enter the WPA or the Tennessee Valley Association, or whatever crazy new programs and institutions that were created under the Roosevelt administration. So this is what they're trying to do with this Green New Deal. Let's look at this article titled AOC is making the Green New Deal a 2020 litmus test. It stated, until now, the Green New Deal has been more of an idea than actual policy. This week, Cortez is about to make a debut. Her resolution is about to make a debut, but its strength lies in its symbolic ties to one of the Democrat Party's biggest historical successes, the original Green New Deal. So here in the original report, they referenced the New Deal by Roosevelt. Here in this policy put forth by Cortez, they reference the New Deal by Roosevelt. Okay? The comparison to FDR has been prominent from the first day Cortez became a public figure. So, here we can see similarities between the global Green New Deal, which was to be implemented globally, but through resistance. They weren't able to do it. And this current Cortez Green New Deal. Goals: revive the world economy. In the current one, they revive the U.S. economy. So they just focus on the U.S. Okay? Create employment opportunities, protect vulnerable groups. Same in the current Green New Deal. And you can see that these other points are similar. And I want to discuss why they moved from a global implementation and rollout to a national implementation and rollout. Here, in another article from Technocracy, we see deeper origins of the Green New Deal. Here, we have a paper written in England in 2008. Okay? A 44-page report by the Green New Deal Group, simply called a Green New Deal. And let's look at the board of the Green New Deal Group. It has members of Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, and so on. All of these people. Look at their positions of authority and power. We got politicians. Carolyn Lucas, member of the Green Party, and a member of the European Parliament, the EU. So they're a globalist organization. Here we've got people from the Friends of the Earth. Here, Colin Hines, co-director of finance for the future, head of Greenpeace International, and policy advisor to Carolyn Lewis here. So they're interlocking directories, as Amos Wilson stated in his book, Blueprint for Black Power. You've got a propagandist, economics editor for The Guardian, to change the public mind, to make them agree with this Green New Deal. Here is the UK arm of the implementation of the Green New Deal. Okay? They are trying to put this in each nation, so each nation has the framework in place, so once all the pieces are in place, they can just connect them. Say, well, your policy in the UK is the same as the policy in the United States, so what do we have to do? Why do we have to worry about there being separations between the UK and the USA? Let's just connect them. Same with the African Union. Oh, you have all these Millennium's development goals. They're the same goals as the UK and the USA. Let's just interlock them. Okay? And you have global white hegemony institutionalized to control all resources, prevent independence from particularly African nations, but other nations from accessing resources because they disagree with the global religion of climate change. We have to stop climate change or the children are going to burn up under the sun. And here it has a lot of information that you can read about propaganda surrounding the Green New Deal. Okay, all of them talk about low carbon energy systems, creating and training new workers supposedly to provide jobs. Okay, controlling fossil fuel prices, innovating financial transactions, okay, regulating the domestic financial system, not the international financial, regulating the domestic financial, that means eliminating it, okay. They say breaking up discredited financial systems, that means your credit union, and so on. You can see this, minimizing corporate tax evasion by clamping down on tax havens. That means all people who are not in the inner circle of the club, excluding the Rockefellers and his cohort, don't pay taxes. But if you're out of that club, you will pay taxes, and you cannot transfer capital to a region which is outside of the framework of this Green New Deal, this global Green New Deal. So it's basically ensuring that no economic activity takes place outside of their purview. Now let's get back to this Cortez tramp. You see how they've packaged her. She's probably got some fashion stylist, and a colorist to match colors to bring out the highlights in her skin. Her little reddish brown skin. She probably, had someone choose these frames, eyeglass frames, to make her look smart. She probably had to go through 25 or 30 of them to see which one looks best on camera and which one makes her look the smartest, even though she's an absolute idiot. Hairstylist, a coach, someone to coach her on talking points. Here is a video called The Brains Behind AOC. I urge you to watch it. Here they uncover the fact that this woman is an actress. She auditioned for this role. She auditioned with a number of other young starlings, young ingenues who thought they were going to get into the political show business. And she was chosen. The reason they found her is because her brother submitted her headshot and resume. And they plucked her out of obscurity from having her ass pinched by a bunch of drunken revelers at some bar she was working at to being a congressperson. You think this woman's going to give up that $200,000 a year salary to save you? You think she's going to give up that daily stipend, the expense account, the full 24-hour a day staff, okay, to fight for your interests? She's going to fight for the interests of these globalists, these people who are at the Trilateral Commission, you know, the Rockefeller gang, the Kissinger gang, and all these people, Clintons and Obamas, and all these keyed in people. Okay, they've got all these kind of Negroes and mulattoes and mixed race people on ice stashed around the country to roll them out whenever they need a fresh face to put before the camera to sell their hackneyed old deal that they're trying to implement. In this video, you see some of the players who are behind her. She had PR firms. She had media propagandists. She had that guy from the Young Turks who basically outlined the policy of trying to take over weak congressional seats in order to push their little globalist agenda. You know, my question is, where did all these foreigners come from? These people are not even American. First of all, this woman is from a privileged background. Her father is some Puerto Rican elite privileged person who came to the United States to benefit from the economic system on the backs of African people in the United States. But that host of the Young Turks is the same way. Lots of these people are just from elite backgrounds from their home country whose parents or themselves came in with money, with skills, with education to get keyed in to positions of prominence and authority in the United States political economy. Okay, that's who these people are. So I'll end this video here. I thank you for listening. I urge you to read these articles, look at this video here on technocracy.news and on YouTube, and you'll see that, you know, don't fall for this trick again. You know, they got this Abrams person out, they got all these people, you know, trying to put a kind face on their same old tired program. We have to be about African sovereignty. That's the only way. This has been the Lumumba Africa Report. Asante Sana. Kwaherini.